orders. If I like, I order twice. Hibachi, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Q&A. It's Sunday night. It is deep into the offseason now after the draft. Man, we've got some things coming up, but it's starting to slow down when it comes to Pittsburgh Steelers and NFL football. But that's no matter. We've got you covered here on the Steel Curtain Network, part of the Fans First Sports Network. I am Jeremy Betts. Glad to be here with you. Welcome to all those who will tune in via chat, via YouTube, Facebook, and X, wherever you're tuning in from. Be sure to get your questions and comments in so we can talk about those. This is the Steelers Q&A. We're going to answer as many questions as we can get to tonight. And to do that with me, I've got a brand new guest, somebody you've probably seen writing for us on steelcurtainnetwork.com, a guy with great insights into the draft and into individual prospects. A lot of good work coming out from Archie Wilson, the newest member, I would think, I believe, of the Steelers, of the Steel Curtain Network. And Archie, you told me before the show, this is your first podcast experience, but we're so glad to have you, man. I'm pumped to do this with you. And so welcome to the show. How you doing tonight?
Awesome, man. Thank you very much for having me. No, seriously looking forward to this. Just talking some ball and getting on and talking with you here. Often listen on a Monday for me it is. So looking forward to it.
Good deal, man.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're at. Tell us what got you into following the Pittsburgh Steelers, and just introduce yourself to us a little bit here.
Yeah, man. So as you can probably hear, probably not your normal accent of an American football fan. So
Sure.
I'm here from New Zealand. I understand we've got a few people from Australia that have been on the Steel Curtain Network, but just a bit further along the Tasman from New Zealand. Yeah. So
Good deal.
love the game, but it's obviously it's not quite as big over here as it is around the world. We're more of a rugby nation, if you know rugby at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
man. I get to sit down and watch a little rugby every now and then, and I'm not going to say I understand everything that's going on, but I like big guys running into each other. I that was my draw to football in the first place. So it's always fun to get to watch different sports like that.
absolutely. Yeah, so fairly similar. And that's, I think, kind of my fandom for rugby turned into looking around and seeing other sports, and then came across the Steelers. I came across the sports news at home. It was the Packers versus Steelers Super Bowl. I just remember the logo, and so from ever since then, I've always been a Steelers fan. So, yeah.
Good deal, man. Well, we're excited to talk with you tonight. And, from reading your writings, it sounds like you love diving into the nuances of player development, of roster building, the details of these prospects and things like that. So have you always kind of been into the draft? Is that something that is kind of your wheelhouse, or where did you start with football?
Yeah, man. So the draft's probably my favorite day of the year. Obviously, I haven't had a Steelers Super Bowl, but for me, the draft is like Christmas essentially. I love going in, watching tape on all the players and getting breakdowns in and see if I'm right on a player or if I'm wrong. But then also just to see who my beloved Steelers bring in. It's an awesome time for sure.
Absolutely. Do you have a college team that you follow?
Yeah, so that was one thing I did struggle to kind of choose a college team. I suppose the Steelers came to me more naturally, but I've landed on the Gamecocks, South Carolina.
All right. Yeah. Hey, they're my southern neighbor here. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So exciting year ahead with Lenora Sellers at the helm there. So I might have a bit of bias to him, but yeah, I think he's going to be pretty special. Yeah.
Man, if he were to become a Steeler next year, that would be something else then for you.
Absolutely, dream come true. That would be for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big Buckeyes fan. I grew up a Georgia fan, but I married into a Buckeye family, of Ohio State family, and really taken that on over the last few years. And so my dream was Justin Fields, and didn't work in the draft, but he ended up coming to Pittsburgh, and I was like, man, we got to keep this guy around. They didn't do it. That's all right. The Steelers have moved on, and a lot of the questions we get on this show, and I've got some in the chat already. We'll start talking about these. is what are the Steelers going to do at quarterback this year? What is our pick at quarterback? And so let's just start with the first question about it. Eric Weidman, one of our regular listeners here. Is Rodgers signing or not? Archie, I don't know if you have an opinion on Aaron Rodgers, the player, whether you think he's going to sign in Pittsburgh or not. But what do you think about Eric's question here? Do you think Rodgers is going to be wearing black and gold before it's all said and done?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do think it will come to fruition. I mean, there's so many things you can read into, whether that was he was throwing with DK. I think the Steelers maybe not having as much urgency as drafting a quarterback early. Maybe they know something we don't. Who knows on that regard? But I think come training camp or whenever we're suiting up in September, he'll be a Steeler for sure.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. A lot has been talked about his off-season regimen here. Like, what's he thinking? What's he going through? Why hasn't he made a decision yet? And in reality, I think it comes down to that he's taking his time because he can, and because he's got a lot of time left before he needs to be stepping onto a field and getting to know a new system. And by the sounds of it, and I'm not gonna call the guy a liar or an exaggerator or anything based on because I don't know anything about what's going on in his personal life, but sounds like he's got a lot going on there. He's 41 years old. He's making basically his last decision as to where he's going to play football, right? I think this is it. Whether he retires or whether he plays for Pittsburgh, I think that's what it comes down to at this point. So big decision for him. And I will defend him from that point of view, saying he's not holding the Steelers hostage. He's not keeping them from doing whatever they want to do. They've said it multiple times. It didn't affect their draft plans. It's always been about 2026 for the quarterbacks throughout the portion of the offseason that we've seen so far. And you're nodding. I think you would agree with that too, based on what we're seeing and the comp pick stuff. But all that being said, Aaron Rodgers, I truly believe, is going to come to Pittsburgh and try, whether or not it's a futile attempt or not, he's going to try for one last shot at glory. And I think Mike Tomlin would be down for that kind of ride. And in the end, I think Steeler fans are going to be down for that kind of ride as well. So we'll see how it plays out. But that's kind of my expectation on all of that. And then Gavin Anthony, I'll answer your question. Or I'm sorry, Gavin said, Jeremy, didn't you go to Ohio State? I did not go to Ohio State. I went to a small school down in Florida. But my wife is from Columbus, so it's been bred into her since the beginning. And that was something that I was never a huge staunch supporter of one team. I kind of liked a bunch of college teams. So Ohio State kind of fitted naturally for me there. And a lot of Steelers come play from Ohio State. So Archie, they asked us, do we think Rodgers is going to be the quarterback? We both said yes, but Dennis Helmick says, what's your pick for quarterback? If you had to choose a starter to start the Steelers season this year, who would you go with?
Yeah, so I've kind of thought through the different scenarios this whole off season, and regarding this, I think Aaron probably is the best option for the Steelers, especially just this year. I'm always looking for the team to win. I want to win as many games as possible and see if we can make a playoff run. And I think Rodgers kind of gives us the best opportunity to do so, because flat out, he can still spin the ball for sure. Like, he's still got the velocity.
Yeah.
And I just think he's probably the best quarterback we'll get in the door for this year alone.
Yeah, I agree with that. At this point in the offseason, if I'm picking one, it's Rodgers, because I think it would be an exciting season with Rodgers behind center. And I don't know what that ends up in. If it ends up in a playoff run or a playoff appearance, one and done again, or neither of those things. Maybe they don't even make it. But all I know is it's going to be a heck of a more exciting season with Aaron Rodgers under center probably than Mason Rudolph. And maybe in the end, that doesn't help the Steelers out when it comes to where they're selecting in the draft. But I mean, let's be real. They planned this from a competing in 2025 standpoint. They don't want to give up on this season and cruise into 2026 with a top 10 pick. No, they want to win it whatever they can this year. And with Rodgers, I think that at least gives you an opportunity at a division run to stay in the race with the Ravens and the Bengals probably this year. And so I think that that's the most exciting thing. Before free agency happened and all that good stuff, obviously, you know my answer. I would have been with Fields. I would have ridden with Fields. I would have paid him the $20 million to stay in Pittsburgh. I might even bump that up a couple million just to make sure I lock him in. Because to me, he had enough upside to where you could see what you had in him this year. And if it didn't work, you had no qualms about moving on. But if it did work, then maybe you save all those picks and just build a real nasty roster next year. So they didn't do that. I don't think Fields wanted to come back in the end. But that would have been my play earlier in the offseason. Unfortunately, that is not in play anymore for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Archie, let's talk about, while I'm looking for some more questions here, let's talk about the draft class, since you've had some articles come out about it, evaluating some of these players. You looked at a lot of them beforehand as well. I don't know if you follow the Steelers Fix with me and Andrew, where we talk about a lot of these guys and the Draft Dynasty podcast, but how did you feel about the class overall? Who was your favorite pick, et cetera, about the draft?
Yeah. So the draft, like, I know a lot of fans that I saw on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, they weren't super enthused about the draft because it wasn't super flashy. But I don't think that's really what the Steelers needed. Like, it's a weird way to put it, but it was kind of like eating your vegetables this draft, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not super nice, but it's just like really good for you. So like taking Harmon early doors, filling probably the biggest need outside a quarterback on the roster was huge, I think. And to get a guy that's kind of in the prototype of the Steelers, with his size and length and athleticism, I think that was a great pick. And then I think my favorite pick was Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa.
Same.
I think.
Yep.
Yeah, he's special, man. Like, he can move pretty well for a big guy. His vision is probably second to none in this class, honestly, and just the scheme fit is off the charts for the Steelers. So getting him at 83 was unbelievable value as well. I thought he was a early second round talent personally. So I think it was value and just filling in needs was kind of the idea, right?
Yeah, and I think they did a great job of mixing that well, need filling with value. I didn't feel like anybody was too crazy a reach. That you might say Waya Black was, like, from consensus board look to where they took him, might have been the biggest reach, but at that point in the draft, you're talking about fit, you're talking about role type players that you think can absolutely step in and be a help to you early without too much development. And then you are also looking for those guys. It's like, man, this guy's got all the traits. Maybe he just needs a couple years to sit behind somebody and get better, learn the game, get used to the speed of it. And I think a guy like Carson Bruner falls into that category, where you saw a lot of things you liked out of him. Dante Kent as well. Saw a lot of things you liked out of those guys. But if you had to plug and play them right now, you'd be pretty nervous about what they're going to give your defense. But down the road a couple years, maybe they step in and are something that can help you out and be intriguing at the very least. So, but, the first through 6 rounds, when they drafted Will Howard, I thought that was good value there too. And you could start to see the Steelers plan coming together. Let me ask you about Will Howard. We had a question about Howard in the chat, or a comment about Howard in the chat, and then a question saying, could Howard be the next Brock Purdy? And my thought was, they're totally different players, but when it talks about what they could provide for your team down the road, do you think Howard has starter upside and plus starter upside that would get a big contract potentially down the road from a team?
Yeah, I mean, when you just look at the history of the draft, Purdy is a massive anomaly. So making that comparison is always tough. But
Right.
Howard, I think value wise, he was a third round quarterback, fourth round quarterback, especially if you look at the tape from his run through the playoffs. Like, it's pretty unbelievable. And I know that he's got all that talent around him with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and that line in the defense, but still, like, he's the guy making the throws, making the decisions. And I think the cool thing about him is he's like a pro style quarterback. Like he made audibles at the line. He did his own protections. And if you were interested, I'm not sure. Have you seen the John Gruden video with him?
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite things I've watched all offseason.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if anyone watching this, I would strongly advise them to go have a look at that video later on. You could see Gruden was like really into the way Howard was able to diagnose like plans and plays and just like his command of an offense.
Yep.
And then when I like watched other quarterbacks that Gruden was with throughout the process, there was definitely a different level of respect, I suppose, for the way Howard kind of carries himself. So that's something that really interests me is kind of the intangibles, which you could relate to Purdy. I think is kind of where I sit on that.
Yeah, that would be where you could compare them. Is kind of the football mind, the intelligence aspect of the game, and I think it's a great point you made that Howard operated from an NFL standpoint where he's calling out protections, he's looking at defenses, he's making full field reads, and there's a lot to like there. I think, play style wise, Purdy is definitely one of these guys that's like you plug him into a system and he's going to operate that system at a fairly high level, right? And we didn't know how high he could do that until he got to the NFL, but it came out and worked. Howard's a different cat when it comes to that because he's more of he's more of a pocket quarterback, yes, but he's not going to sit there and just win by feeding the scheme. I don't think he's going to try to make plays outside of structure a little bit. He's got a bigger body. He likes to run around a little bit more. He's not quite as hit the back foot and throw like a lot of these guys want their quarterbacks to be, which is why I think Shanahan was really intrigued by Purdy and made him their final pick that season. Howard's not necessarily that kind of guy. He's still kind of a see it, throw it guy, but I think he can improve. So I have expectations of him to be a good long-term backup with some upside.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
if you can
absolutely.
get that upside and hit that upside, I think that there's an opportunity for him to be something, but not at the expense, Archie, of going out and getting the guy in next year's draft, unless, of course, he jumps in and has a Ben Roethlisberger type season this year for an injury or something along those lines. So that's an intriguing thought process there. But let's see here. You already mentioned your favorite pick, Archie, was Caleb Johnson. I echo that as well. I could not believe he was still there when the Steelers took him. I about had a shouting match in my in my house. It was a lot of fun. I don't know if you were on the live stream when it happened, but I was pretty excited about that
awesome.
one. But yeah, it was great. My other favorite is just Derek Harmon. I just fell in love with the player throughout the process. Really good guy. And really good player. Let's see here. This is a good question. Another one from Dennis Helmick. How will the wide receiver room do if we don't get Rodgers? So I think this is an intriguing question because you've got two massive personalities there now. You've got a young group behind him that's a little bit inexperienced when you're talking about Roman Wilson and then Calvin Austin coming off his best season. He's looking like a player there. But there's not a lot to hang your hat on beyond the first two guys. So how does this wide receiver room do if they don't have the do-it-all quarterback back there and they're relying more on a Mason Rudolph or a Will Howard to get things done?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, certainly, because it's almost like if you think about the way that DK, Metcalf, and George Pickens play, you could see when Mason Rudolph stepped in towards the end of that 23 season, the way Mason plays like kind of suits the deep threat wide receiver a bit, big play quarterback, I suppose Mason is. So from a fit standpoint, you could maybe argue like Mason's almost a better fit to fit the styles of the two wide receivers. But just from Rodgers, I think he's just got the ability to maybe make throws that others can't in the QB room. And I think we might be able to see a little bit more of George Pickens and DK over the middle with Rodgers at the helm, which is kind of something we haven't seen from Pickens just because most of our quarterbacks are thrown outside the numbers. and that middle of the field is basically blocked off. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see if there's maybe some untapped potential from the likes of Pickens going forward. So yeah, and
Yeah.
then
And
I think. Oh no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. You go.
No, you're good, man. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and then with the rest of the room, like I really like Calvin. I think he's turning into like a real NFL quality player. And Robert Woods, I think, was a nice acquisition there after the draft. Sneaky, I think he's a kind of a power slot, can block, and just a legit veteran in the room to kind of help
Yeah.
DK, who's probably going to be the alpha in the room, I suppose, along the way. So, and then obviously you got Roman Wilson, but I don't have super expectations for him, just because we haven't seen anything from him yet. So, I think that's possibly the best way to
Yeah.
take that
Yeah.
on.
And there's not a lot of pressure on Roman Wilson either after you've got all these guys in here. So that probably helps him a lot. And I remember a couple years ago with Calvin Austin, after he missed his whole first season basically due to injury, we were thinking the same thing. Another one of these speed guys that the Steelers aren't going to make work, and probably just never going to be a real fit in the NFL. He's more of a gimmicky guy anyway, and then kind of settles into a role, and they used him well. And I think that's the thing I like about this wide receiver room is everybody's got a role. And for those who would say DK Metcalf and George Pickens, they feel like similar players. They're not. They don't do the same things well. DK Metcalf is definitely a run after catch guy. He's a over the shoulder deep ball specialist. George Pickens is a hands catcher. He goes up and gets those 50-50 balls. He's kind of a box out body type where DK Metcalf tries to win. Like, I mean, with the physicality, obviously, of that he brings to the table, he wants to win like Calvin Austin wants to win, where you just running by guys and running around guys. That's how DK wants to play. It's kind of like if Chase Claypool had worked, right? That's what I say about DK
Absolutely.
Metcalf. But yes. Any other thoughts on the wide receivers there?
No, I just think it'll be exciting to see how DK and George kind of fit. And then the mentality within the room will be interesting to see how it goes out on a Sunday, I suppose, to see if we can keep cool heads and let the talent on the field do the talking. That'd be awesome, I think.
It would, and I'm excited for it. Somebody mentioned earlier, I'm trying to find it here, where they said that they really like the roster. Outside of quarterback, it's a really good roster, and I think that that's really the case, and it might be just fine once you get Rodgers in the building too. So we'll see how that all plays out. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. For those listening via audio, if you're watching live, we're not going anywhere, but give us a second here on the audio side, and we will be right back with more of the Steelers Q&A. All right, and welcome back to the Steelers Q&A. It's a Sunday night for me. It's a Monday morning for Archie Wilson over in New Zealand. Archie, thanks again for hopping on the show with me. We're having a good time. Let's get to some more thoughts here. But before we jump into some questions, the NFL schedule release is coming up in just a couple weeks now. That's exciting for me. I know a lot of people are like, why does it have to be this big deal? I enjoy it because then you get to start to see how the season's going to play out. And we already got a little bit of a tidbit of information. If you believe Pony, if you believe Andrew Filipponi, which I think last year he got some of the early stuff right. So there's a few things that he's right on. But we got our first tidbit about the schedule. Steelers look like they're going to be playing the Vikings in Ireland this year. And a really neat opportunity for the fans in Ireland, a really neat opportunity for the Steelers. However, the last time they played the Minnesota Vikings overseas, it didn't go so well for them. What do you think about that matchup if that's the case?
Look, if that's the case again, I mean, the Vikings are obviously a hell of a team right now. I mean, they've got the head coach, they've got Jefferson, who's obviously a problem outside. But I think I was listening to Cam Haywood's Draft Live show that he was doing, and he was talking about how the team went over real late last time. So maybe they might have gone the Friday before. So I think it might be worth their while to go earlier, because I remember him saying the Vikings were there just about all week and got acclimatized. So it's awesome. It'll be an awesome experience for fans traveling to Ireland, and then the players getting to experience that. It doesn't do me too many favors because it'll be a 2 a.m. game or a 3 a.m. game or
Right.
whatever. But it'll be cool. Yeah, it'll be an awesome experience for all involved, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm excited for the rest of the schedule, but it's actually shaping up to be quite an intense schedule for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, you got the NFC North, all four teams there should be really good or improved in the case of Chicago, and there's not an easy game in that stretch. And then obviously you got a bounce back season probably on tap from the Bengals here. The Browns feel like that they probably won't be as bad as last year either. And then it's the Ravens, obviously. And then in the AFC, I can't remember what division. It's the AFC West, right? That they play this year.
Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of teams that loaded up on the AFC side of the ball this last year too. So it's gonna be a tough schedule for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that when you look at it, does anything stand out to you how the Steelers might be able to navigate their schedule this season, or any matchups you're looking forward to in particular?
I mean, obviously, I always enjoy the divisional games. Obviously, the Ravens are the ones I look forward to the most. But then, yeah, I think, as you said, there's going to be no easy games for the Steelers this year. I mean, even if the Browns look like the weakest in the division, it's still divisional football. So, you just hope you don't catch them on a Thursday. Otherwise, we might have some issues there. But, I haven't looked and circled any games in particular outside of the Ireland game. I'm looking forward to just to see the Steelers out of the country. Will be fun again. And then, obviously, Steelers-Raven rivalry is pretty special every time it comes across. So those always stick out to me. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was wrong about it. They're playing the AFC East this year, not the AFC West. It was the AFC West this last year. So my apologies there for the confusion. But again, that's another group of teams that are improving. And you think about the New England Patriots. They had a really good draft, and they've got their quarterback now, it feels like. So I think it's going to be some of these games, Archie, that the Steelers have traditionally struggled in late in the year under Mike Tomlin. These big opponents that you're going to have to play in the playoffs. How can they handle those teams? And I'm not even necessarily talking about the NFC squads. I'm talking about those AFC bad boys like the Bills that you're going to have to play. And you've got some up and comers like the Patriots, and you've got a revenge game for Justin Fields and the New York Jets. That's going to be a fun one, and kind of a mini rivalry going between those teams. I think this will be the third year in a row they've played each other. So those are kind of the things I'm looking forward to. And and then you look at the NFC North opponents, and North versus North this year. These are the two best divisions in football over the last few years. Last year, the NFC North kind of took the crown there, but the AFC North looking to take that crown back. So we'll get to see all four of those teams head to head. That's going to be appointment viewing, even if you're not a fan of one of those teams.
Man, for sure. I mean, just big matchups across the board for the Steelers this year. And I think it all comes down to staying healthy is the first thing. I really want them to see if they've kind of been able to fix any of those soft tissue injuries that they've had along the last few seasons. So it'll be interesting to see if those numbers come down at all. But yeah, like as we saw, and I just hope we don't get a schedule like we did at the end of last year. I'm going to the playoffs with the 3 games in 10 days against maybe the 3 best teams in football. So,
that was brutal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sure. I always ask the question too, if you're a fan of a team, do you want a front-loaded schedule where it's like all the good teams you play up front, or do you want it backloaded when all these teams are in their groove, right? And I think it works to your advantage and disadvantage both ways.
Absolutely.
Advantage maybe on a front-loaded schedule is you can hit some of these teams while they're figuring themselves out, while you're figuring yourself out, and have a nice feel good stretch at the end of the season where you can prep for the playoffs and feel confident going into it. And then
carry
there's
some
also
momentum.
the flip side of it where you say, man, we want to know where we stack up with some of these really good teams. And the Steelers found out last year. I don't know how they'll find out this year, but this schedule is going to be tough from top to bottom. Any thoughts on what you would prefer there, front loaded or back loaded schedule?
Yeah, no, it's certainly interesting because obviously you could take momentum into the playoffs if you are looking at getting a playoff berth there. If you have the front-loaded schedule, and you might be able to steal a win away from a team that you're an underdog against, just blowing off the cobwebs to start off the season. But then again, you could say if you have a back-loaded schedule, and imagine the confidence you'd taken if the Steelers had managed to take two wins out of those 3 games into the playoffs, or even one, just knowing that they could, take on one of the big dogs in the league and come out with a win. So I think both definitely have their advantages and disadvantages. So I think it's just how the team navigates either scenario is kind of how that'll come out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think where I'm going to be most concerned is this is a team that's going to rely on some not old, but aging veterans especially on the defensive side of the ball. And we saw last year that as the season progressed, some of those guys were starting to get banged up. And Minka was banged up in the middle of the season. TJ was banged up towards the end of the season. Cam was the only one who was kind of mostly healthy all year. Can those guys stay fresh? I think that's why you brought in Jack Sawyer if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Somebody who you feel a little bit better about throwing out there in the rotation a little bit more than some of these back end of the roster number 4 edge guys that you've had in the past. So if that all plays out, then I might prefer a little bit of a backloaded schedule where you play some of these playoff teams at the end. But then again, Archie, let's not have, like you said, the 3 games in 10 days thing again. Let's spread that out a little bit more. That would feel a little bit better to me.
Absolutely not. Yeah, for sure.
All right, we've got a couple more questions here that we're going to get to, and then I've got some fun ones at the end for you, Archie, just to get gain a little bit more knowledge about the kind of fan you are and what you like to watch when it comes to football. But let's get to some of these questions real quick. Afton Forred, one of our super faithful listeners here, she is basically on every show. Afton, thanks for your question. Are there any positions you really want them to get deeper at heading into camp? I'll open the floor for you here.
Yeah, no, so I kind of wrote an article recently just about some of the positions I thought they might address in the draft, but didn't. And one of them was wide receiver, but with Robert Woods, I suppose you could say that's decent depth to add in there. And then the other 2 positions I spoke about were guard and corner. So I just felt that when I was looking back at the roster last year, you had James Daniels, Sam Alou, Mason McCormack, and Spencer Anderson. So you had 4 NFL level guards from what we know now on the roster. Now when I'm looking at it, it feels like you might have, maybe you've still got McCormack, Sam Alou, and Anderson, but you don't have that 4th guy. Maybe that's got a whole lot of NFL experience, or maybe it wasn't a young guy that you could kind of let grow for a year like McCormack was supposed to be. So I was just maybe thinking they might be able to find another guy to provide some competition to the likes of Anderson and McCormack through the camp.
Yeah, and you mentioned in that article that you were kind of surprised the Steelers did not draft a guard somewhere in the draft, and I was surprised that too. I felt like the 4th round where they took Sawyer was kind of the sweet spot for that. But obviously, with him still on the board, they liked him enough to where they felt they couldn't pass up that value there. So it was kind of surprising to see them not address it at some other point in the draft. To me, that means that they feel like they can grab a guy on a cheap deal as you get closer to training camp or closer to the doldrums of the offseason from the free agency pool still. And there's some guys who you wouldn't mind being your 5th guy on the offensive line especially if McCormick starts to struggle or there's an injury. I still think they could use another guy to plug in there at swing tackle too. So I agree with you. The offensive line is probably not done. And I think they've got over $30 million in cap space still. They won't need more than about 12 or 15 to sign the rookie class this year. So they've got some room to play with to go get some more positions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, just the line really. And that was just the biggest surprise to me just because of how much attention they've put into the trenches that they went away from the line there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So an interesting change of pace, change up for the Steelers there, but not one that I was necessarily bummed about, but it was just not something I was expecting. So
Yeah.
because I like the
Exactly.
guys
Yeah.
that they brought in their place.
Absolutely.
All right. We've got another one here from John S. Do they need a more physical slot guy? Can DK play that role along with being a deep threat? And they brought in Robert Woods. He kind of figures to be that guy. I think you can put Ben Skoranek there as well if you want to get deeper down into your group. But I do think that Arthur Smith is going to be able to mix and match these guys all over the field. You saw George Pickens play a little bit in the slot last year. I wonder if he might be more adept to that role with DK handling the downfield X receiver threat now, and let George Pickens work in the middle of the field some. What do you think about this question?
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with that as well. I think George maybe brings a bit more from a route running standpoint than DK. DK is just a pure physical specimen that will beat you with his pace and physical tools, whereas I think GP can kind of put defenders in a bind with maybe some route running that we haven't seen on tape a whole lot. And I know it's just off-season videos, but it looks like he's been really working on some route running there this off-season. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think the other thing is that DK, he's obviously always been on the outside, but he's never had another guy on the roster that could maybe dominate on the outside as well like him. He's kind of had Njigba, who's Smith and Jigba, sorry, that's a slot, and Tyler Lockett, who kind of also works on the inside a little bit. So maybe they do try him out a little bit just because GP can also work out on the X as well. So it will be interesting for sure.
Yeah, it is funny. DK has always been paired with kind of a smaller bodied receiver, and Jackson Smith and Jigba was not small, but he's not a big X receiver, right? So there's some ways they can play it. And I think the other guy we had to factor into the big slot, quote unquote, equation is Freiermuth because of his versatility. So I think that the Steelers have answers to the questions on the test when it comes to guys that they can line up at all these spots now that they have DK Metcalf in the building, which is kind of why I thought it never made sense to trade Pickens without a replacement for him directly in place, because DK Metcalf was not his replacement. He was an addition to this wide receiver room that you needed. If you were gonna get rid of George Pickens, you were gonna need to replace him with a wide receiver 2 caliber player. And unless they were going to draft Matthew Golden in the first round, that probably wasn't happening in this draft either. So it made sense when they weren't getting the right offer for him that they stick with him. And maybe, just maybe, he's a guy that gets an early extension this offseason. I think that's in play still, potentially. And in any case, I like the Steelers at wide receiver a lot more this year than I did last year.
Yeah, certainly one of the better rooms in the last year for sure. And I think you can argue it's one of the better rooms in the NFL now, with your 2 headliners in the room, plus you've got an ascending Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson's a bit of a wild card there as well. So yeah, it's exciting for sure.
And low key, that's why a part of the other reason why I want Rodgers here. I want those guys to have fun this year. I want to take advantage of them. And the other thing is, like, my other argument for Rodgers has always been Rodgers went to New York to be the savior of the Jets franchise and lead them to the promised land. That's not why he's coming to Pittsburgh. If he were to come to Pittsburgh, he's coming here to compete one last season, not be the face of the franchise. Yeah, he's gonna get a lot of press because he's Aaron Rodgers and he's a quarterback. But Mike Tomlin's the face of this franchise right now, and Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. Aaron Rodgers would be 4th or 5th down the totem pole of guys that they're clamoring to ask questions to at the end of a win or a loss. And so that has to feel comforting to him on some level. And then to have 2 or 3 guys now in this wide receiver room that you can just kind of throw the ball up to and let them make plays, that's feel pretty good if you're Aaron Rodgers as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see here. John S. also asked, do you think the NFL will make the Christmas games a constant team like the Lions and Cowboys for Thanksgiving? Could the Steelers be the Christmas team? I think we had heard that the Chiefs were kind of pushing to be the Christmas team. I had heard some rumblings about that. But it sounds like there's going to be multiple teams every year on Christmas now. That's just how they want to play the schedule because of how big a deal it was for them last year. So I could see the Steelers being a part of that since they're a high-profile franchise. How do you feel about the holiday games, though, specifically for the Steelers? Would you like to see them as kind of an every-year Christmas team?
Yeah, no, it is interesting for sure because you are one of the most historic franchises in the league. So you're going to bring a lot of attention, and the NFL is obviously just finding more and more ways to bring in revenue, whether that's through international games. An extra game on the schedule even could be in play in the future, and then kind of taking Christmas from the NBA, it seems. So I think seeing the Steelers on Christmas, it'll be cool for sure. Did we have a Christmas game this year, I believe, as well?
Yeah, we did. Yep, that was part of the rotation.
Chiefs,
It was the Chiefs on Christmas.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So just another high-profile game. Lots of eyes on the Steelers. It's always good. Yeah, enjoy primetime matchups for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The primetime ones are awesome. The Christmas game, I'll be honest, kind of ruined my Christmas there for a couple hours.
Oh yeah, that's also true. I suppose.
Yeah.
For me, it's Boxing Day, so I've had my Christmas, and now it's Boxing Day for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. So there's pluses and minuses to it because for one, I'm home, I'm eating good food, I'm chilling with family, and get to watch the Steelers, and then they go out and lay an egg like that and get blown off the field. Yeah. Not even competitive. That was tough, but we'll see how they play it. But I think that having more exposure to the Steelers is not necessarily a problem. I just maybe need to cool it a little bit if they're not having a great game.
Well, that's also true. Yeah.
Hard to do though, right? Hard to do.
Absolutely.
All right. We got a couple comments here about final records. And I know it's really early for this, but we were talking schedule already. Archie and Mark Malone says, I'm seeing 12 wins this year. Dennis Pavlak says, I say we go 11-6 this year. What do you think about this? If you had to look at the Steelers schedule, the roster they've put together, let's just assume, I guess, that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback this year for the Steelers because all signs still indicative of that, pointing to that. What is this team looking at if for an early record prediction? And maybe we'll revisit this closer to the season or something, Archie, and see what your thoughts are then. But if you had to pick something right now, what you got?
Oh man, it's always hard to say anything less than 9-8 if Tomlin's at the helm. But I think it's hard to argue that the team's not better on paper this year than last, especially if you have Rodgers at quarterback. Like you look up and down, I think most position groups have gotten better, if not substantially better. So I could see 11-6. I think I'll probably sit on a slightly more conservative side and go 10-7.
Sure. Their third straight 10-7 season. I could see that for sure. It's kind of the team they feel like, but you may, in the end, this may end up being a tougher schedule than last year, or at least matching it because of the teams that you drew here. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I kind of tend to agree. I think the floor of this team, no matter who's starting at quarterback, is determined by their coach, Mike Tomlin. And it's that 8-9 win range. And I would push for 9 because we just haven't seen that losing season yet.
Exactly.
So then if you add Mason Rudolph, who doesn't give you a bump in that regard, I think your ceiling is probably 9 or 10 wins. But with Aaron Rodgers, who could give you a bump in the right direction, who could be the tide that raises all boats, if you will, I think that you're looking at a ceiling now of 11-12 wins. And so It's probably like you said, probably going to be right in the middle of that, because that's just who the Steelers are recently. But I could
Yeah.
see 12 if you draw a couple teams that get hurt, or
Hmm.
your roster just comes together and Rodgers has something left. I could see a 12-win year. So 10, 7, 11, and 6 is probably what I go with at this point. But I saw somebody put the Steelers at 30th in their power rankings earlier on X,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
saw
just
that as well.
ridiculous to me. You don't know anything about the Steelers if you think they're going to end up 30th on any power ranking at the end of the year.
No,
So let's
absolutely
keep
not.
that in mind. So, yeah.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
right, Archie, just a couple questions for you as we're closing out here. Do you have a favorite Steeler all time that you'd like to tell us about real quick?
All-time favorite Steeler. I suppose with my fandom of the team starting maybe in the last 9-10 years or so, at the most. Of kind of the back end of Ben's career,
Sure.
a bit of Antonio Brown, but I'd say my favorite on the current team um, is has been George Pickens. I know
Okay.
he's caused
Yeah.
a lot of issues, but it's just he was one of my guys coming out of that class that I really wanted the
Yeah.
Steelers to get. Like I would have been happy with him in the first round. I just thought he was that talented. Um, but to get him, and especially once you've kind of like named someone like your guy, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in that draft process, and they land with your team, you kind of turn a blind eye to maybe some potential issues. So I've always been a big
Sure.
fan of GP in his game, um,
Yeah.
even
And
though
talent.
he's certainly caused some issues.
Right. Yeah. Talent does that too. You can turn a blind eye to some issues for talent sake. Steelers
Hmm.
did it with Antonio Brown for years. So, um,
Yep.
good stuff there. It if you let's see, if you were not watching the Steelers, okay,
Hmm.
what's another player out there that you just love to watch? It can be anybody, but do you have a player or a team that you just love to watch if it's not the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Easy. So as a player, Brian Branch, I just love the way he
Okay.
plays the game. Um, I think he could be a sneaky defensive player of the year, level talent. I couldn't believe he fell into the second round as he did, and the Lions got his hands on them. He just flies around, makes plays, um, hits you hard, and he's just a flat out baller. I think so. He's always good to watch.
Absolutely.
Um, and then from a team standpoint, um, I think I'm going to enjoy maybe watching the Bears this year.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I
That's it.
like Caleb Williams, so I wouldn't mind seeing him succeed. And then they just got a lot of offensive talent, so it'll be exciting to see if they can put it all together. And then obviously
Yeah.
with the new head coach Ben Johnson, it's an exciting pool of talent there for sure.
It really is. I've been pounding the table for the Bears this offseason, and a lot of people have. But there are some people who just don't like Caleb Williams too, and whether that's just personality or what, there's a lot of people who just don't like him. But I think that he's ready to take the NFL by storm this year with that head coach and that cast of
Yep.
characters, a better offensive line in front of him. So watch out there. The other team I'm pounding the table for this offseason is the New England Patriots. I
Yeah.
If I had to pick the team that was nowhere close to it last year that's going to make the playoffs this year, I'd pick the Patriots. That
Absolutely.
head coach bump that they're going to get from Vrabel in and of itself
Hmm.
is worth 3 or 4 more wins in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then if you add the talent and another year with Drake May, getting things done, and Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator there. He's not a
Hmm.
good head coach, but he's a darn good offensive coordinator, especially for
Yep.
quarterbacks. I think that team has a lot going for them, and I think when it's all said and done, they're probably the second best team, excuse me, in their division. Miami's I can see regressing this year, and then the
Hmm.
Jets. Who knows what the heck's going to happen with the Jets? But the Patriots, to me, could be a riser team there too. So
Yeah.
it's going
And
to be
they had
fun,
an
and Steelers
awesome
get to play
draft for
both of those
sure.
teams this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome draft.
Yeah, and the Pats,
So,
I think they won the draft, honestly, like
yeah,
grade-wise. I think getting Will Campbell was awesome, and then Kyle Williams out of Washington State.
yeah,
I think he's a
fun
pretty
watch.
certified baller as well. Absolutely. One of the better route runners in the class, I
He
think,
was one of your
maybe out
guys
there with
too. I saw
Golden.
one of your articles.
Yeah. Nah, huge on him. I wouldn't have
Yeah,
minded him at in the third round as well. But
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson obviously was my top guy there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Who's your most hated Steeler rival? Who do you hate the most of the Steelers rivals?
Ooh. Probably the Browns.
Okay.
And more so just because
course.
whenever we lose to them, it's just even more frustrating because we should beat them every time it happens.
Yeah.
But then we've just had some frustrating losses to them in recent memory. And I kind of, in a weird way, have a little bit of respect for the Ravens and the
Yeah.
talent that they're able to bring in. And I think Lamar's he's like a pretty solid quarterback. Like he's a baller as well. So I think
Right.
I don't have a lot of. Obviously wasn't around to watch all the big Steelers Ravens rivalries, so I don't have the feel of what they were like essentially. But
Sure.
just based off recent memory, the Browns it's just frustrating, for sure.
I feel you there. The Browns are always a good choice. Nobody's gonna yell at you for it being the Browns. That my wife is a Browns fan, and she's trying her best to get my little girl to be a Browns fan too, and she's already messing with Daddy. She says, "Go Browns, stinky Steelers" all the time, and it makes me really upset.
Yeah, that's tough.
But
That's tough for sure.
I'm gonna say it's the Ravens for me, just because I was hard and heavy fan, as a teenager during the black and purple era, where the Steelers and Ravens were just pounding the crap out of each other every week, and the 2008 playoff game where Troy Polamalu takes the interception in for a score to close it out. Can't stand the Ravens, man. Can't stand the Ravens. Can't stand the Browns either. The Ravens, it's more like, bitter enemies. That's kind of the feel there. The Browns, it's like nobody likes to lose to little brother. That's the Browns.
Yeah,
so they make me angry when we lose to them. So I get you from that perspective.
Exactly.
And then the Bengals, it's like I don't know what the comparison for them is, but it doesn't bother me as much when we lose to the Bengals. So I don't know.
No, they're kind of just here nor there. Hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, good stuff, Archie. What you got coming up on the website? I really appreciate you coming on. I want you to give a opportunity to plug to the guys and gals listening in here what you got coming up, and we'll try to get you on another one of these sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Been lots of fun. So thank you for having me on. Just keep an eye out on the website. I'll have a few more articles coming out regarding kind of draft stuff, because that's kind of, as we're talking about, my wheelhouse when it comes to the Steelers. So keep an eye out there. But appreciate you having me on, man, and I'll look forward to whenever I next can come on.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to the Steel Curtain Network, to fansfirstsports.com for everything coming up. We're going to keep you covered throughout the doldrums of the off season. We'll find stuff to talk about here so that you have stuff to listen to and read. And Archie's a big part of that on steelcurtainnetwork.com. And then you can follow me on X at thebets93. Archie, you're on X as well, right? Where can people follow your account?
Ooh, I just find that.
That's okay.
It is _Steelers.
A Wilson _Steelers. Is that what you said?
Awils, so AWIELS _Steelers.
Okay. AWILS _Steelers. Give him a follow on the old Twitter X app, and stay tuned for more. Archie, thanks again for coming on, man. Thanks to all the listeners. We appreciate you. We will talk to you next time here on the Steelers Q&A.
Living a good life.